These were the chilling final moments of a 10-year-old boy waking up to discover his entire world destroyed. I do not want my dad to receive the death penalty because it would be hard on my grandparents. I do not want my whole family gone. These words, spoken by the youngest member of the Haney family, would echo through a courtroom and a community forever changed by unthinkable violence. On January 17, 2020, 16-year-old Colin Jeffrey, C.J. Haney, methodically shot and killed his mother and 3 younger siblings over the course of 5 horrifying hours in their Grantsville, Utah home. But this wasn't a moment of rage or a tragic accident. This was calculated, premeditated, and it would shatter the illusion of safety in a town that hadn't seen a single homicide in nearly 2 decades. To the outside world, the Haney family was everything a Mormon family should be. Devoted to their faith, dedicated to each other, and deeply rooted in their tight-knit community. But behind the closed doors of their suburban home, warning signs were being ignored, cries for help were being silenced, and one troubled teenager was planning the unthinkable. The Haney family embodied everything that made Grantsville, Utah, special. Consuelo Alejandra Alex Haney, 52, was the heart of the family, a devoted mother born in Chihuahua, Mexico, who centered her entire life around her children's well-being. Neighbors remember her as an extraordinary cook who could have told celebrity chef Gordon Ramsay what to do in the kitchen. She was passionate about gardening, especially her beloved fruit trees, and was always willing to help anyone in their church ward or community. Her children were equally cherished. Alexis, 15, was a freshman at Grantsville High School with quiet confidence, whether saving goals as goalkeeper on the junior varsity soccer team or creating art with exceptional talent. She played piano beautifully, loved the Lord of the Rings series, and had made an Iron Man sculpture that still sits treasured in her uncle's home. Matthew, 14, was an 8th grader known for being 6 moves ahead in chess and passionate about Star Wars, often quoting, "I have the high ground." Teachers and peers alike appreciated his kindness and competitive spirit. He was both gentle and fierce, the kind of brother who made Boy Scout trips memorable with his humor. The youngest, Milan, 12, aspired to be an engineer and was known for being tough as nails despite her sweet appearance. The 7th grader played soccer and volleyball with fearless determination, creating art with her sister Alexis and leaving encouraging notes throughout the house signed from so-and-so. At birthday parties, other children would eagerly await her turn at the piñata, knowing her strength would break it open for everyone. Their father, Colin Haney Sr., 50, would survive what was coming. The family's adult son, Danny, 24, was away at Utah Valley University, completely unaware that his family was about to be torn apart forever. They were active members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, deeply religious and well-regarded throughout their community. The children were homeschooled for most of their lives, creating close sibling bonds that neighbors described as fiercely protective of each other. They had moved to Grantsville in 2010, establishing themselves as the kind of family others looked up to. But there was one member of this perfect family who was struggling. CJ, Colin Jeffrey Haney, was 16 years old and fighting battles no one could see. The warning signs had been building for months, but no one in the Haney family could have imagined where they would lead. Approximately 6 months before the murders, the family made what seemed like a positive transition. CJ moved from homeschooling to public high school. For most teenagers, this would have been an exciting opportunity to make new friends and experience a more traditional school environment. For CJ, it became the beginning of his psychological unraveling. CJ struggled profoundly with this transition in ways that alarmed everyone who knew him. He suffered from a documented anxiety disorder that made everyday social interactions feel like insurmountable challenges. He had a significant speech impediment that made him self-conscious about speaking in class or to other students. Most concerning of all, he possessed what defense attorneys would later call impoverished social skills and abilities that left him completely unprepared for the social dynamics of high school. School officials who worked with CJ described him as reserved and quiet, but those words couldn't capture the depth of his isolation. He was a teenager who had spent his entire educational life surrounded by his loving siblings, suddenly thrust into an environment where he felt completely alone. Neighbors who saw him walking to and from school noted he appeared to be a perfect target for bullying and teasing, who didn't look like he'd found a group of kids that he could flourish within. The contrast was stark and heartbreaking. At home, CJ was surrounded by siblings who protected each other fiercely. The Haney children had been described by everyone who knew them as unusually close, bound together by years of homeschooling and shared experiences. But at Grantsville High School, CJ was just another awkward teenager with a speech impediment and severe social anxiety, struggling to navigate hallways filled with confident, socially adept peers. As a young teen, CJ had multiple challenges that compounded his difficulties. He had impoverished social skills and abilities, an anxiety disorder, significantly delayed education, a speech impediment, and a life of relative isolation that had left him unprepared for the social realities of public school. Prior to the murders, he had no criminal record, no history of drugs or alcohol, and no gang involvement. He was, by all accounts, a troubled but not dangerous teenager who was simply overwhelmed by circumstances he couldn't handle. The teenager's mental health deteriorated rapidly as conflicts with his father intensified throughout the fall and winter of 2019. What prosecutor Scott Broadhead would later describe as typical teenage arguments about school attendance, church participation, hanging out with friends, and video games became sources of overwhelming stress for CJ. These weren't just disagreements, they were reminders of all the ways he was failing to meet his family's expectations. In his meetings with a therapist after the murders, CJ revealed that in the months leading up to the killings, his social isolation and arguments with his father had increased dramatically. According to court documents, he felt constantly judged and criticized. He believed he was not meeting his father's expectations, which led to even further isolation as he retreated into himself rather than seeking help or trying to communicate his struggles. Most critically, there was a moment when everything could have changed, but fear and stigma prevented the intervention that could have saved 4 lives. About a month before the murders, around late December 2019 or early January 2020, brother Danny had a conversation with his mother Alejandra that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Alejandra told Danny that CJ had been saying some dark things concerning statements that had frightened her enough to recognize that her son needed professional help. She was a mother who knew her children better than anyone, and she could see that CJ was in crisis. She had reportedly talked to Colin Sr., their father, about sending CJ to therapy or getting him some kind of mental health treatment. But Colin allegedly denied her request and told her he didn't want CJ to say anything to a therapist that could lead to jail. This decision was made out of fear of stigma around mental health treatment, fear of what seeking help might mean for the family's reputation in their tight-knit religious community, and fear of potential legal consequences if CJ revealed thoughts of violence to a mental health professional. The irony now is, CJ still ended up in jail, and the rest of my family is dead, Danny would later say in court, his voice filled with pain and regret that would never fully heal. Brother Danny would later blame his father directly, though his words carried more sadness than anger. For the most part, CJ didn't really have any issues up until like 6 months before all of this happened, when he made the transition from homeschooled to high school. I'm not trying to excuse or justify what CJ has done. He knows what he did, and I support whatever sentencing happens, but I feel like this could have been prevented. As winter turned to January 2020, CJ was spiraling deeper into isolation, rage, and distorted thinking. He was angry at his father's restrictions and criticism, terrified of continuing to disappoint his family, and consumed by thoughts he couldn't control or understand. What no one realized was that CJ wasn't just thinking about escaping his problems anymore. He was planning to eliminate them entirely. Friday, January 17th, 2020, started like any other day in the Haney household, but CJ had been planning for this moment for weeks. He had already made the decision that would change everything. Today, his family's routines, the predictable patterns of who came home when, would become the roadmap for their destruction. CJ stayed home from school that Friday, telling his family he wasn't feeling well, but instead of resting, he spent the morning methodically preparing for mass murder. He retrieved 2 guns from the family's collection and carefully planted ammunition throughout the house in strategic locations. His plan was systematic and chilling. Wait for each family member to arrive home and kill them individually before they could discover the bodies of those who came before them. At 1 p.m., Mother Alejandra and 12-year-old Milan returned from school pickup. Alejandra had just collected her youngest daughter from school, a routine she'd performed countless times before, probably asking Milan about her day, maybe discussing plans for the weekend. They entered their home together through the front door, expecting to find their normal, safe family environment. CJ shot them both as they entered the home, killing them with multiple shots to their heads, necks, and upper bodies at point-blank range. The woman who had begged for her son to receive mental health treatment just weeks earlier was killed by the very child she had tried to save. Milan, the family's youngest victim, the fierce ninja who loved superheroes and left encouraging notes around the house signed from so-and-so, was shot at point-blank range with the family handgun that would claim 4 lives that day. Around 2 p.m., Alexis arrived home from school. The talented artist and goalkeeper, who had probably been thinking about soccer practice or her latest art project, walked into a house where her mother and youngest sister lay dead. CJ followed his 15-year-old sister and fired 5 shots into her head and chest. For the next 3 hours, CJ waited in the house with 3 dead bodies, demonstrating a level of psychological control that would later terrify investigators. During this waiting period, 2 neighbors visited the Haney home, and both interactions revealed the chilling extent of CJ's ability to appear normal while surrounded by carnage. The first visitor was concerned about something routine. The second was the sister's piano teacher, who had become worried when Alexis and Milan didn't show up for their scheduled lessons. Both visitors reported that CJ appeared completely normal when he answered the door. He was polite, gave reasonable explanations for why his sisters weren't available, and showed no signs of distress or unusual behavior. He spoke to them while standing just feet away from his dead mother and siblings, maintaining perfect composure and providing believable excuses for their absence. At 5:17 p.m., 14-year-old Matthew returned from a birthday party. Matthew, who loved Star Wars and always seemed 6 moves ahead in chess, who was particularly close to CJ, and had probably been looking forward to telling his big brother about the party he'd just attended. He entered the house calling out for his family, expecting the usual warm chaos of the Haney household. The defendant shot the 14-year-old in the head at point-blank range in what prosecutors would later describe as an execution-style killing. The fact that Matthew was killed in this manner, close to CJ, trusting enough to approach him without fear, revealed the depth of CJ's psychological break from reality. The final confrontation began at 6:15 p.m. when Colin Haney Sr. arrived home to a house that seemed unusually dark and quiet. Initially thinking his family must not be home, Colin called out as he entered, expecting to hear familiar voices respond. Instead, he turned and saw CJ standing in the darkness, raising a gun toward his father's chest. CJ fired multiple rounds, with only 1 bullet hitting his father in the leg. During the struggle, CJ told his father that his mother and siblings were dead, and his intention was to kill everyone in the house except himself. When Colin pleaded for his life, telling CJ his mother would be sad if he killed him, CJ coldly replied that they were already dead. The physical struggle lasted approximately 1 hour. CJ repeatedly struck his father in the head with the gun, causing blood to rush down Colin's face, but the father continued fighting to survive. The violence only ended when a neighbor arrived to return house keys, finding father and son almost knotted together in struggle. Colin ultimately wrestled the handgun away from his son, ending the 5-hour killing spree. The investigation began with a neighbor's frantic 911 call around 7 p.m. as she drove Colin and CJ to Mountain West Medical Center in Tuo. During the car ride, CJ calmly told the neighbor that he had killed his family, providing the first admission of guilt that would later become crucial evidence in his conviction. Grantsville police responded to a call of shots fired inside the home at approximately 7 p.m., arriving at 93 South Eastmore Drive to find a scene that would haunt veteran officers for years to come. 4 deceased victims were found throughout the home, each killed with multiple gunshot wounds from the same family handgun. The methodical nature of the crime scene immediately told investigators that this wasn't a moment of rage or domestic dispute that had escalated. This was systematic, planned violence. Corporal Rhonda Fields, serving as department spokesperson, captured the community's shock. It's shocking news. It's beyond words. It's an unbelievable reality that we have to accept now. For a town that hadn't experienced a homicide in nearly 2 decades, the quadruple murder was incomprehensible. The investigation faced immediate challenges. Despite confessing to the neighbor during the car ride to the hospital, CJ refused to speak with investigators once he was formally taken into custody. This sudden shift from confession to silence hampered efforts to determine his motive and understand the psychological factors that had led to the murders. The Utah Bureau of Forensic Services conducted methodical analysis of what would become one of the most challenging cases in the region's history. Crime scene analysis revealed multiple shooting locations throughout the house, evidence of the father-son struggle, and ballistic evidence showing all victims were killed with the same family handgun. Broadhead said the investigation was ongoing and police were still examining electronic devices such as laptops and phones, hoping to find a possible motive. The investigation revealed specific wound patterns. Alexis suffered 5 shots to her head and chest. Matthew was killed execution style with a single bullet to the head, and both Alejandra and Milan died from multiple gunshot wounds to their heads, necks, and upper bodies. Perhaps most disturbing to investigators was the timeline that emerged from witness statements and forensic evidence. The murders had taken place over 5 hours, with CJ calmly waiting between each killing for the next family member to arrive home. During this time, he had interacted normally with 2 different neighbors, showing no signs of distress while standing in a house containing 3 dead bodies. Despite extensive investigation, authorities never fully established CJ's motive beyond his statements about anger toward his father and fear of family rejection. As Corporal Fields acknowledged, we all have those same questions. Why? We don't know. CJ's psychological profile revealed a dangerous combination of mental health issues, social isolation, and family dysfunction that had created a perfect storm for violence. At 16, he was described by mental health professionals as having significantly delayed education, severe anxiety with impoverished social skills, and emotional immaturity that left him completely unprepared to cope with normal adolescent challenges. Defense attorney Richard Van Wagener emphasized that children are constitutionally different from adults in certain respects. Children are more vulnerable than adults to negative influences, and a child's character is not as well formed as an adult's. CJ was, in his lawyer's words, a troubled teen who lacked certain abilities and resources, and was 10 years from full brain development. Yet CJ's psychological profile also revealed calculating elements that distinguished him from typical juvenile offenders. He told police his intention was to kill everyone in the house except himself, explaining his reasoning in chillingly logical terms. This wasn't impulsive rage. This was strategic thinking about how to avoid consequences. Prosecutor Scott Broadhead argued that CJ's only explanation for the murders was that he was angry at his father because of conflicts over his school and church attendance, or being restricted from hanging out with friends or playing video games. Arguments teenagers and parents have all the time. The killings can't be explained away by anxiety and immaturity, Broadhead said. Just about every 16-year-old in the history of this world has decided not to kill their parents. But CJ's reasoning revealed something even more chilling. He had explained that he killed his mother and siblings because he feared his family would turn on him if he only killed his father. This demonstrated a capacity for strategic thinking, even amid severe psychological distress. The teenager's plan was methodical and premeditated. Prosecutors revealed CJ intended to kill his family and possibly burn down the house, seeking what he called a clean slate and new opportunity in life. This wasn't about ending his pain. It was about erasing his family to start over. The most heartbreaking revelation came not from CJ himself, but from his surviving brother Danny during the sentencing hearing. Danny revealed that about a month before the murders, he had a conversation with his mother where she told him that CJ had said some dark things and had reportedly talked to Colin, their dad, about sending CJ to therapy. This was the moment everything could have changed. Alejandra Haney had heard her son's dark things and was frightened enough to request professional help. She recognized the warning signs that everyone else had missed, but Colin Haney Sr. refused the request, fearing CJ might say something to a therapist that could get him in legal trouble. The irony now is, CJ still ended up in jail, and the rest of my family is dead, Danny said, his words cutting through the courtroom. This revelation exposed the tragedy's most devastating aspect. It was preventable. The very fear that prevented the family from seeking mental health treatment, the fear of legal consequences, created the exact scenario they were trying to avoid. 4 people died because seeking help was viewed as dangerous rather than necessary. For the most part, CJ didn't really have any issues up until like 6 months before all of this happened when he made the transition from homeschool to high school, Danny testified. I feel like this could have been prevented. The weight of that statement, "this could have been prevented," would hang over the courtroom and the community. A mother's instinct to protect her child by getting him help was overruled by a father's fear of stigma, and that decision cost 4 lives. On January 22, 2020, Colin Jeffrey Haney, 16, was charged with 4 counts of aggravated murder, 1 count of attempted aggravated murder, and 5 counts of felony discharge of a firearm with serious bodily injury. All charges were first-degree felonies. Under Utah state law, murder suspects 16 years or older are automatically tried as adults. The judge set bail at $4 million, $1 million per family member he was accused of killing. It's just the most horrific tragedy for the entire family, for their friends, and this close-knit community, Haney's attorney Richard Van Wagener told reporters. On July 19, 2022, Colin Jeffrey, CJ Haney, now 19, pleaded guilty to all charges. On July 12, 2023, CJ Haney, 20, was sentenced to 4 consecutive sentences of 25 years to life for the murders, and another 25 years to life concurrently for attempting to kill his father, effectively 100 years in prison. I want you to know I've learned from what I've done, Haney said, addressing the court. 3rd District Judge Teresa Welch told him, "You not only deprived your family members of their lives in such a tragic and terrible manner, but you also deprived yourself of your life with them. These are the people who loved you most." Colin Haney Sr., present at sentencing, declined to make a statement. His surviving son Daniel addressed the court via audio call, explaining the family had seen red flags about a month before the murders. "He was robbed by not getting proper help," Daniel said. "This could have been prevented." For Grantsville, healing came slowly. Yellow ribbons appeared throughout town on trees, lampposts, and fences. Online fundraisers raised over $100,000 for the surviving family members. "As you can imagine, this loss is almost unbearable," Colin Haney Sr. said through his attorney. "Colin can hardly comprehend what has happened." The case remains Utah's deadliest mass shooting since 2007, a stark reminder of how mental health struggles and missed interventions can lead to devastating consequences. Justice may have been served, but for the survivors, the pain will last a lifetime, knowing that help was just a therapy session away, and that sometimes the greatest danger comes from within the very walls we call home.